I stood frozen in my own living room, the polished hardwood floor cold under my feet, the smell of my stepmother's expensive perfume hanging heavy in the air. My father, Richard, shoved a thick stack of legal papers into my hands. The heavy bond paper felt cold, official, and final. Beside him, my stepmother, Tiffany, crossed her arms, her lips curled in that familiar, smug grin that always made my skin crawl. My half-brother, Nick, leaned against the wall by the fireplace I'd had installed, smirking like he'd just won the lottery. "Sign it, Terry," my father commanded, his voice sharp and devoid of warmth. It was the same voice he'd used when he told me my tech ambitions were a waste of time. "What is this?" I managed, though my throat was tight. "We're declaring you mentally unfit to manage your company," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's for your own good, darling. You've been stressed." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, suffocating pressure in my chest. These were the people I'd invited over for dinner, the family that had mocked my ambitions until CrossGuard, my digital security startup, had revolutionized the industry and made me a millionaire. Nick chuckled, pushing off the wall. "You're not in control anymore, genius." I looked at my father, searching for any sign of doubt. There was none. His eyes were cold as steel. "Your mother's legacy belongs to the family, not just to you. If you're watching this, subscribe, like and let me know where you're watching from." The next morning, sunlight sliced through my blinds, but the world felt gray. I woke to the incessant buzz of my phone. Not calls, but alerts. Account activity warning. Transaction failed. I grabbed the phone, my heart hammering. I logged into my primary bank app. The balance, $0. I tried my investment portfolio. Account access restricted. A cold dread, heavier and more potent than the night before, settled over me. I tried to call my bank, but I was put on an automated hold. I was locked out. Every asset, my home, the cars in my garage, every last share of the company I had built from nothing was frozen, locked under a temporary family trusteeship. They hadn't just ambushed me, they had executed a coup. My hands were shaking as I called my lawyer, Jacob. "Terry? I was just about to call you. What the hell happened last night?" "They're trying to declare me unfit," I said, pacing the kitchen that was apparently no longer mine. "They served me papers." There was a chilling silence on the line. "Terry," Jacob said, his voice dropping. "That can't be right. I'm looking at the court order right now. It was filed, and signed by a judge, yesterday morning hours before your meeting even happened. The trap had been set long before I'd even opened the door." My phone pinged again, this time an email notification. It was from my own company server. Subject, access revoked. I tried to log in, muscle memory taking over my fingers. Access denied. They had locked me out of my own servers, the digital fortress I had designed. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about money, they were stealing my life's work. I scrambled to my laptop, pulling up the company's internal directory. My name, Terry Cross, was still listed, but my title was gone. In its place, under Acting CEO, was a name that made me see red. Nick Cross. Nick, who thought a firewall was a piece of metal in a car. He was in my office, in my chair. I was grabbing my keys, ready to storm the building, when another alert lit up my screen. It was a link to a major news outlet. The headline screamed at me, "Tech CEO Terry Cross steps down due to mental health concerns." They'd even included an old photo of me, looking exhausted after a 72-hour coding marathon. The narrative was set. They weren't just thieves, they were architects, building a new reality where I was unstable, and they were the saviors. They were painting me as a madman to justify their greed. I stormed into the CrossGuard HQ lobby, the glass doors hissing open. The atrium, usually buzzing with energy, fell silent. Employees stared, their faces a mix of confusion and pity. "Terry," my lead engineer whispered as I passed. I ignored him, heading straight for the elevators. 2 security guards, men I'd hired myself, stepped in front of me. "Sir, we can't let you go up. This is my company." I yelled, the frustration boiling over. "My name is on the wall." "Terry, son." My father's voice. He strode into the lobby, not from the elevators, but from the front door, as if on cue. And he wasn't alone. A camera crew was right behind him. "We're just checking on you, son," he said, his voice loud, dripping with that fake, patronizing concern for the rolling cameras. It was a performance. They were humiliating me publicly, painting me as the unstable, aggressive founder I'd been labeled as. "Get away from me," I snarled, backing away. "Please, Terry, don't make this harder," my father said, motioning for the guards. The cameras zoomed in, capturing my rage, my desperation. And then I noticed it, a second camera crew, one I didn't recognize, positioned by the stairs. They weren't with my father. They had a small, live icon on their feed. They weren't just recording. They were live streaming the entire, humiliating scene. I retreated to the only place I could, a small, anonymous hotel room paid for in cash. The footage from the lobby was already everywhere, spinning the exact story they wanted: unstable Terry Cross tries to force entry. My phone rang. It was my therapist, Dr. Alastair. "Terry?" "I'm confused," he said. "A news site just contacted me for a comment about a video, one that supposedly shows you attacking staff this morning." My blood ran cold. "What?" "No, I just left. I didn't attack anyone." "That's what I thought," he said, sounding troubled. "I'm sending you the link." I opened it. My stomach dropped. It was me, or a perfect digital copy of me, back in the CrossGuard lobby. But this version of me wasn't just yelling. It shoved one of the guards, grabbed a laptop from an employee's desk, and smashed it on the ground, face twisted in a mask of pure rage. It was a deep fake. Flawless, terrifying, and utterly damning. I knew this tech. I knew its flaws. I spent hours analyzing the raw file, tracing its metadata. It was sloppy, arrogant. The file had been rendered and uploaded not from a secure, anonymous server, but from a private IP address. An IP address I recognized. It was registered to Nick's personal laptop. I had to get off the grid. There was only one person I could trust. Jacob. My college roommate, the only person whose cybersecurity skills matched my own. He was a digital ghost, a white-hat hacker who valued privacy above all. I found him at his off-grid data haven. "Took you long enough," he said, not even looking up from his 3-monitor setup. "I saw the news. And the deep fake. Sloppy work. They've locked me out of everything, Jacob. They're trying to steal my entire life." "They are stealing it," he corrected. He cracked his knuckles. "Let's steal it back." We dug into the deepfake's metadata, not just the IP, but the file's digital signature. "The software license, it was paid for," Jacob murmured, his fingers flying. "From a shell account." He dived into the account, peeling back layers of encryption. 10 minutes later, he hissed. "Terry. The account is registered to a hidden trust. Under your stepmother's maiden name, Tiffany Brandt." He wasn't done. He pulled up the transaction history. "They didn't just buy the software with this account, Terry. Look." My eyes scanned the log. Massive deposits. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, flooding in the day after the fake video dropped. They weren't just framing me, they were cashing in on it. "If they were this arrogant with their finances, they were arrogant with their security," Jacob said, already launching a new attack. He targeted their home network, the one I had ironically upgraded for them 2 Christmases ago. They're running an old firmware on their router. Amateur. He was in. He navigated through family photos, shopping receipts, and then, a hidden folder on my father's study computer. It was mislabeled household audio. Inside, a single, 3-hour-long MP3 file. It was from a smart speaker, accidentally set to record. We listened. The voices of Nick and Tiffany, plotting. "Lock Terry out before he realizes the will changed," Nick said. Tiffany laughed. "He'll be so busy fighting for the company, he'll never check the estate. By the time he does, he'll already be declared incompetent." My mother's will? She had left everything to me, her only child. They had changed it? The recording continued, their voices plotting the media narrative, the fake breakdown. Then, the study door opened on the recording. My father's voice, cold and final, cut through the speakers. "Stop debating. The plan is set. He's emotional. He'll crack. He'll never see it coming. The will. My mother's will." The words echoed in my head. I'd spent so much time building my future, I'd neglected to protect my past. I drove to the bank, not my bank, but a small, local credit union where I kept a single, old-fashioned safe deposit box. It held my birth certificate and my mother's original, notarized will. I sat in the sterile viewing room, the steel box in front of me. There was the will, just as I remembered. But tucked beneath it was a thick, sealed manila envelope I'd never seen before. My name was on it, written in my mother's elegant, familiar script. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal. Inside was a short, handwritten note, dated just 3 months before her sudden, heart failure, years ago. "My dearest Terry, if you are reading this, it means he has finally come for you. I am so sorry. I tried to protect you. Do not trust him. Do not trust any of them. If they ever come for you, follow the blueprints." My heart hammered. Follow the blueprints? Tucked behind the note was a thin, black keycard, unjackabied, and a small, silver USB drive. It was labeled, simply, Vault C. I knew where to go. Vault C. My mother had been a passionate sculptor. Her art gallery, which my father had quickly shuttered and sold after her death, had a private collection in the basement. He'd sold the building, but the new owners had just left it empty, a monument to a tax write-off. I broke in through a back window, the smell of dust and dried paint filling my lungs. In the basement, behind her largest metal sculpture, was a small, almost invisible panel. The keycard slid in. With a heavy thud and a hiss of old hydraulics, a section of the concrete wall receded, revealing a steel door. Inside, it wasn't a vault of art, but of paper. Stacks of documents, binders, and hard drives. I plugged in the USB drive. It wasn't blueprints for a building. It was the original code, the core patents, the foundational algorithms, for CrossGuard. My company. And the name on every single patent application, as the sole inventor, was Eleanor Cross. My mother. My father hadn't just mocked my ambitions, he'd stolen the foundation for them from his own dead wife. I was reeling, trying to process the scale of the theft, when a sharp click echoed behind me. A motion sensor light flickered on, illuminating the vault. Someone else was in here. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. A figure stepped from the shadows of the doorway. It was Iris. My father's personal assistant. The woman who scheduled his meetings, screened his calls, and knew all his secrets. My immediate thought was that I'd been followed. I braced for a fight. "What are you doing here?" I growled. I was waiting for you," she stammered, holding up her hands. She looked terrified. "I promised her I would be here, if you ever found this." Promised who? Your mother. My mind stalled. I didn't work for your father, not originally. I worked for her. She placed me in his office years ago. I was her spy. Iris explained that my mother had known, for years, about my father's manipulations and his greed. She'd been building this vault, this archive of his crimes, preparing for a war she never got to fight. You have to get out of here, Terry, Iris whispered, grabbing my arm. They know you're digging. They know about me. They're trying to clean up loose ends. What do you mean? What is the secret? Iris looked at the vault door, as if afraid he'd appear. Terry, your mother. Her death. It wasn't heart failure. It wasn't natural. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. He forged her death certificate. What do you mean, forged? I said, the words catching in my throat. He killed her, Terry. Iris's eyes were wide, brimming with tears. Or at least, he had her killed. To get control of her patents, her estate. This vault was her only defense. Proof, I demanded. I need proof. She knew he would try, Iris said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, encrypted USB drive. Your mother was in the hospital for observation before she died. She insisted on a private room. She had me install a pinhole camera, hidden in a clock. She was terrified of him. My hands were numb as I took the drive. We huddled over my laptop right there in the dusty vault. The footage flickered to life. It was my mother, frail in the hospital bed, but her eyes were sharp. My father was there, leaning over her. They were arguing. You will not touch what is Terry's, my mother's voice, thin but fierce, crackled through the tiny speaker. It all belongs to the family, Eleanor, my father's voice replied, dangerously calm. He leaned in closer. And you are no longer family. He reached for her bag. She tried to cry out, but she was too weak. As she began to clutch her chest, her eyes wide with terror, the footage jittered violently. A hand, his hand, wearing his distinctive gold signet ring, swung toward the clock, and the screen went black. I left the vault in a daze, the USB drive feeling like a lead weight in my pocket. Iris and I agreed to meet the next morning. But she never showed. Her phone went straight to voicemail. A cold knot of fear tightened in my stomach. I drove to her apartment. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, calling her name. Silence. The apartment was empty. Not just empty of her, but empty of everything. The furniture was gone, the counters wiped clean, the closets bare. It was a professional cleaning. They had scrubbed her from existence. But they'd missed one thing. On the kitchen floor, lying face up as if dropped in a hurry, was a single photograph. It was Iris, looking much younger, laughing on a boat. Her arm was linked with my father's. On the back, in his handwriting, Copenhagen, 2016. The affair. It hit me like a second betrayal. Iris hadn't just been my mother's spy, she'd been his mistress. He'd been manipulating her, too. And the will changed, that audio recording from the study. Iris must have been the one who forged my mother's will. She was a double agent, trapped between them. And now that she had finally chosen a side, my mother's, my father had disposed of her. I was running out of time. My father was erasing every trace of his crimes. I had to go public, but I had no platform. My family, however, did. An alert pinged, CrossGuard acting CEO Nick Cross to hold emergency press conference. I watched the live stream from my burner phone. Nick, looking uncomfortable in one of my custom-tailored suits, stood at my company's podium. We've uncovered some terrible discrepancies, he stammered, reading from a teleprompter. It appears my brother, Terry, in his unstable condition, has embezzled millions of dollars from the company. The room of reporters erupted. Embezzled? They were pinning their own theft on me. I couldn't let it stand. I drove to the HQ. I knew the service tunnels, the ones I'd designed to be blind spots. I bypassed security and burst through the side stage door. "He's lying!" I shouted. The cameras whipped around, the flashbulbs blinding. Nick actually paled. "Terry! Security! He's having an episode. They forged the video. They're the ones stealing." I yelled. Nick held up a hand, regaining his composure. He smirked. That same, hateful smirk. "As you can see, he's delusional. But, you don't have to take my word for it." He clicked a remote. The massive screen behind him lit up. It was me, again. Another deep fake. This one showed me in a dark room, looking terrified, confessing to wire fraud and embezzlement. The room was deathly quiet, watching the fake me confess my crimes. Nick was beaming, a picture of smug victory. He thought he'd won. He thought I was alone. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single text from Jacob, "I'm in." On the giant screen, the deepfake version of me suddenly froze. The audio stuttered. Then, the video dissolved, replaced by a black screen with glowing green text, as if from an old-school hacker movie. Jacob was putting on a show. File, Terry_confession_v2.mp4, the text typed itself out. Analyzing metadata. File created, 3 days ago. Source IP, 192.168.4.1, E-cross laptop 01. A collective gasp went through the press room. Nick was white as a sheet, frantically mashing the remote. Rendering software, S20HV, unlicensed. Source video, E-cross laptop 01/webcam/Nick_practice.mp4. Jacob wasn't just exposing the fake, he was showing them Nick practicing his lines to feed the deepfake software. The reporters were shouting questions. But Jacob wasn't done. A new file flashed on screen. An invoice for discretionary media production from a shell company. And at the bottom, a scanned authorization signature. Richard Cross. My father. The entire press conference descended into chaos. The press conference was a blow, but not a knockout. My family's lawyers spun it as a retaliatory hack by a disgruntled Terry. They were wounded, but not dead. I had the proof of murder and fraud, but it was my word and a dead woman's against a billionaire. I needed something undeniable. I needed to catch them in the act. "They're paranoid," Jacob said from his new, secure location. "But they're also greedy. Let's use it." We set the bait. We used a trusted backchannel to leak a rumor to a few high-profile financial bloggers. Broken and cornered, Terry Cross is rumored to be liquidating his remaining founders' shares, the only assets the trust couldn't seize, on an offshore private Jacobet to fund his escape from the country. We fabricated the shares, making them look just legitimate enough to be tempting. To my family, this was their last loose end. They would want to buy the shares to consolidate 100% control. We watched. It took less than 6 hours. A transfer was initiated from the family trusteeship, the very one they'd used to lock my assets. $20 million, moved from my mother's trust, to an anonymous, offshore account in the Caymans. They thought they were buying my silence. They had just paid for their own handcuffs. "They're getting sloppy," Jacob said, his fingers a blur. "That Cayman bank? Their security is a joke." We were in his new safe house, a windowless data bunker in the basement of an industrial building. He hammered at their firewalls, and within an hour, he was in. The anonymous account, it's not anonymous, Terry. It's registered. To who? Tiffany Brandt. My stepmother's maiden name. The same name used for the deepfake software. The arrogance was staggering. "We've got them," I breathed, watching the account details flood Jacob's screen. It wasn't just the $20 million. It was decades of transactions. Laundered money. Insurance payouts. And then I saw it, a massive deposit, dated 2 days after my mother's funeral. "Download it," I ordered. "Download everything." The progress bar crawled across the screen. 80%. 90%. 100%. "We have it," Jacob said, a rare smile on his face. "We have it all." The words were barely out of his mouth when the lights in the bunker flickered and died. We were plunged into total, suffocating darkness. For a split second, there was silence. And then, the world exploded. An earth-shattering boom from the street above. The concrete walls shook, dust raining from the ceiling. It was the sound of a car bomb. It was Jacob's car. The blast threw me against the wall. The air filled with concrete dust and the acrid smell of explosives. My ears were ringing. "Jacob!" I yelled, pulling out my phone's flashlight. He was on the floor, a piece of shrapnel part of the steel door embedded in his shoulder. Blood was pooling fast. They knew," he gasped, his face pale. "They must have put a tracker on the car. We have to go. Now." I ripped my shirt, packing the wound, and hauled him to his feet. We stumbled out the back exit into a dark alley, the sounds of sirens already growing closer. "Terry, they're not just greedy," he wheezed, leaning heavily on me. "They're desperate. They're killers." He was losing consciousness. "You have to, the truth. It's buried deeper. In your father's past. Before your mother." He slumped against me, but not before pushing a small, hardened drive into my hand. His own blood was smeared on the casing. "I found this, on their main server. Couldn't crack it. Project Crown." His eyes rolled back, and he passed out just as I heard shouting from the end of the alley. I hid Jacob in a dumpster alcove, dialed 911 for an anonymous tip, and ran. I was alone, hunted, and holding what felt like my last hope. I holed up in a cheap motel, paid in cash, and got to work on the Project Crown drive. It was encrypted with a level of security I'd never seen from my father. This wasn't his work. It was military grade. It took me all night, but Jacob had taught me well. I found a backdoor, a flaw in the key exchange. The drive unlocked. The files were old. Decades old. From before I was born, back when my father was just starting out, long before he met my mother. It was a meticulously documented insurance scam. A business partner, a faked accidental death, a massive, multi-million-dollar life insurance payout. That payout was the seed money for his entire empire. The money was laundered through the very family trust that now held my assets captive. This was the template. He had done this before. This was how he'd perfected the plan he would one day use on my own mother. My blood ran cold. I scrolled through the faked police reports, the forged coroner's statements, and then I saw the name of the deceased partner. The partner whose death he had faked. It was Eleanor. Eleanor Cross. My mother. It didn't make sense. The dates were all wrong. This Project Crown was from before he met her, unless. My mind raced back to the bank accounts. The Cayman account. The insurance payout after her funeral. But I also remembered the other drive. The one Iris gave me. The hospital footage. I plugged it back in. I'd been so focused on the footage, I'd ignored the other files. There were medical payment receipts. Small, regular, monthly payments. To a private, long-term care clinic. In Norway. Why would my father pay for a dead woman's care? I drained my last few $1,000s on a one-way ticket to Oslo. The clinic was remote, nestled in a snow-covered fjord, a place for the rich to hide their secrets. I used my mother's maiden name, Larsen, claiming to be a distant relative. They let me in. I walked down a sterile white hallway. And there, in a private sunroom, looking out at the mountains, was a woman, older, frail, her hair white. But it was her. It was her. "Mom?" I whispered. She turned. Her eyes, my eyes, widened. Tears instantly flooded them. "Terry," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "You found me." "But, the footage, he—" "No, darling," she said, grabbing my hand. "I faked my death to escape him. I left you the clues so you could finish what I couldn't." We held each other for a long time, two ghosts reunited. She explained everything. Project Crown was the template. She was the original partner he'd faked the death of, so they could both cash out and start fresh. But he'd betrayed her, keeping the money and forcing her into a marriage, holding the fraud over her head. The murder at the hospital? It was a setup. Iris, her true ally, had switched the bag with a drug to simulate death. The footage was their insurance policy, recorded to implicate him if he ever betrayed her again or came after me. She'd been in hiding, funded by Iris's secret siphoning of my father's accounts, watching me from afar. "But Terry, you must be careful," she warned, her grip tightening. "He is more powerful than you know. His influence runs deep in politics and the law. He doesn't just have money, he owns judges." "I have everything," I told her. "The deep fakes, the car bomb attempt, the bank accounts." "Not everything," she said. She went to a small safe in her closet. "He got arrogant, years ago, when he thought I was broken." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I got him to sign this, disguised as a trust addendum. It's a full, signed confession to the original Project Crown fraud. His signature. On paper. He never made a copy. I returned to the States, a man reborn. My mother was secure, moved to a new, undisclosed location. Jacob was recovering, hidden and protected by a private security team I now funded. It was time to stop reacting and start hunting. I wouldn't just drop the bomb. I would make them tear each other apart first. I started small. I used my knowledge of their systems to trigger a series of automated, high-level IRS audits on their known shell corporations. I leaked anonymous, untraceable tips to financial regulators, just enough to get their personal accounts frozen, citing the $20 million transfer. I spoofed emails from their own lawyers, hinting that the case was lost and prosecution was imminent. The pressure worked. The paranoia set in. Our hidden microphones, still active in their house, picked up the sounds of their alliance shattering. My father grew silent, cold. But Nick cracked. "The money is gone," he screamed at our father, the audio feeding directly to my laptop. "The accounts are frozen. You said I'd be CEO. Where is my share, old man? You promised me my share." The argument was the most beautiful, terrible thing I'd ever heard. It was the sound of rats drowning in their own filth. My father, calm and cold, told Nick he was a worthless, sniveling disappointment, and that he would get nothing. My stepmother, Tiffany, was wailing in the background, not about the murder, but about her reputation. And then Nick, in a final, desperate burst of rage, screamed the words that sealed their fate. "You did this. It's all your fault. You said it was a simple plan," he shrieked. "You killed her. You killed her, just like you killed her trust in all of us. You killed Mom." He meant my mother. He knew. He had known the whole time. My hand hovered over the Go Live button on the streaming setup Jacob had built for me. I had linked it to every major news outlet, every social media platform, and a dozen whistleblower sites. I hit the button. The private argument, the raw confession of conspiracy, fraud, and murder was suddenly, globally, public. The feed was live, and the world was watching. The fallout was instantaneous. Within minutes, the live stream had millions of viewers. The audio from my hidden mic was so clear you could hear the exact moment they realized it was being broadcast. Then, a new sound joined the feed, sirens, wailing in the distance, growing closer. The police, spurred by the live confession and the mountain of evidence my lawyers had simultaneously forwarded to the district attorney, raided the estate. And this time, the real news cameras were there, capturing every second. They were led out in handcuffs, my father, my stepmother, and Nick. Their faces were masks of shock and disbelief. As they pushed my father into the back of a squad car, he spotted me. I was standing across the street, in the shadows, watching. He didn't look defeated. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He stared right at me, and a cold, knowing smirk spread across his face. As the officer pushed his head down, he mouthed the words, "Just for me. You think you've won? You became me to beat me." Weeks later, the trials were set to begin. My company was mine again. The accounts were unfrozen. The family trust was dissolved. I stood in my childhood home, which had been seized as a state asset. It was empty, hollowed out, every piece of furniture tagged as evidence. The silence was heavier than any noise. My father's words echoed in the emptiness. You became me to beat me. Had I? I had used spies, traps, deceit, and manipulation. I had become the very thing I'd always hated. The victory felt cold. The triumph felt sterile. Revenge hadn't healed the betrayal, it had just cauterized the wound, leaving a hard, ugly scar. The truth was out, but the damage was done. The front door creaked open. I turned, tensing. It was my mother, walking freely, without fear, for the first time in decades. She stood beside me, looking at the bare walls where her art used to hang. He was wrong, she said quietly, as if reading my mind. He used his tools to corrupt. You used his tools to build justice. Now, she said, taking my hand, go build something they can't corrupt. 6 months later, I stood on the main stage at the World Cybersecurity Summit. The lights were bright, the crowd a sea of faces. I wasn't there to launch a product. I was there to tell my story. My family tried to have me declared mentally unfit, I began, my voice clear and strong, echoing through the auditorium. The room went silent. I told them everything. The legal ambush. The deep fakes. The corporate theft. The car bomb. I told them how my family used the very tools of my trade, technology, finance, and the media to try and destroy me. I told them about my mother, about her faked death and her resurrection. They tried to take my wealth, I said, my voice dropping but losing none of its power. But what they really, truly lost, was their soul. My gaze found my mother, sitting in the front row. She was smiling, tears of pride streaming down her face. I nodded, once, just to her. A silent promise, kept. The applause was thunderous. I stepped back from the podium, walked off the stage, and into the light, not as a victim, not as an avenger. Just as Terry. Free at last. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now.